Only 6 months until graduation, and I've got a job lined up. We don't need her anymore, right? We don't, but let's at least use her until we get our inheritance. I too want to get rid of the trash as soon as possible.
It seems Ben was also there. We had separate bedrooms, so this was the first time I realized Ben was awake. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop on their conversation, but their unsettling talk froze me in place. They continued their conversation, tearing at my heart, unaware I was listening. For the next 6 months, I acted as if I heard nothing, changing nothing in my demeanor. Then came Jim's college graduation day. He left early in the morning, all geared up. Of course, there was no word of thanks for raising him or an invite to a meal.
I won't need dinner today.
He said before leaving. Had I not heard that conversation, it might not have bothered me. But a word of gratitude wouldn't have been too much to ask, I thought. Probably he's going out to eat with his biological mother and Ben. Ben also said he didn't need dinner. After seeing them off, I was left alone in the quiet room, with just a pen and paper. I am Sarah. Currently 55 years old. I've lived with my husband Ben and his son, Jim, for 20 years. Ben and I are both in our second marriages. After not getting along with my ex-husband's family and being mentally exhausted, I was discarded like trash by his parents. It was Ben who reached out to me during my lowest point. We were high school classmates. Not particularly close, but he reached out after learning about my divorce at a small reunion. At the time, Ben was a single father raising his 2-year-old son, Jim.
Life isn't over for us yet. Let's keep our spirits up.
Ben said. That one line from Ben saved me. It didn't take long for us to understand each other, as we both carried similar emotional scars. And soon we were drawn to one another. I was scared to remarry, but Ben's approach made me decide to date him. And so, at 35, I remarried. After the wedding, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. Despite being advised against quitting my job and remarrying with a child, Jim was only 2 years old at the time. I thought it was most important to be accepted as a family member. Since Jim was too young to remember anything, and I always liked children, I wanted to give my all to parenting. I saw no problem with remarrying with a child. However, I soon realized my thinking was naive. Jim wouldn't eat or sleep. And he cried at the sight of me, being extremely shy. Hoping his shyness would wear off, I tried my best to become a mother to him. I endured the night crying and engaged fully during the day, but he wouldn't open up to me. Seeing my struggle, Ben said,
Maybe it's because his biological mother was beautiful. He's not used to your face.
It was a casual remark without malice. But that moment hurt me deeply, as a woman, a wife, and a mother. After that, Ben would compare me to his ex-wife at every opportunity.
What are you using here? The soup my ex-wife made was better.
An unnecessary comment after tasting the soup.
My ex-wife was terrible at parenting. At least beat her in that.
A comment meant to belittle me under the guise of criticizing his ex. Before we married, Ben was always encouraging, but after, I felt treated like a slave at times. No matter what I did, Jim never warmed up to me, and Ben's behavior was terrible. The thought of divorce crossed my mind more than once in the first year of marriage. But divorcing would only prove the naysayers right. I kept encouraging myself, managing the household and parenting as best as I could. Jim never warmed up to me. He stopped crying at the sight of me, but never smiled or called me mom. Ben and his family, even strangers, were all smiles around him, yet it seemed like I was the only one he disliked. Yet, over time, I grew to love Jim. I was happy to see him grow.
Mom, don't come!
Once he started kindergarten, he begrudgingly began calling me Mom. But he furiously sent me away when I attended a school event. Consulting his teacher offered no solution, as they said he was just being clingy to Mom. Happy about his growth, but troubled by our strained relationship, I continued to worry.
You'll get used to it eventually.
Ben said that too, but he never really faced my concerns. One day, I asked Jim, "Jim, I love you so much. How can I make you love me?" Jim looked surprised by my question. I felt something off in his expression, but I waited for his words. Then, Jim opened his small mouth.
Do you really love me, Mom?
Of course I do.
That's a lie. You hate me. Dad said so.
I was shocked by Jim's words. Ben had said that. What did he mean by that? What do you mean? Dad said I hate you?
Yeah. I won't be fooled. You're a fake mom. Because of you, my real mom is gone.
Jim left the living room after dropping those words. I was shocked. I had nothing to do with Jim's mother's divorce from Ben. Yet, Ben blamed everything on me. Even after Jim was old enough to understand. Not opening up to me and calling me a fake mother was all Ben's doing. That night, I confronted Ben. Jim called me a fake mother. You're the only one who could have told him that. But Ben defiantly said,
I did say that, but it's not wrong, is it? Don't blame me for not being liked.
I was so frustrated, I couldn't say anything back. I still don't understand why Ben would do such a thing. Eventually, my relationship with Jim didn't improve, and I felt more distanced from Ben. Yet, children's growth doesn't wait. It was when we were preparing for Jim's elementary school entrance.
Is this backpack okay?
Ben pointed to a luxury backpack. I was surprised by the price. It looks nice, but isn't it a bit too expensive?
Why don't you get your parents to buy it as a gift?
What? I tilted my head, not immediately grasping Ben's words.
Your family is rich, and they can surely afford a gift for their grandson's school entry.
Ben said that without even noticing my dumbfounded state. Indeed, my family was financially comfortable. Owning real estate, and my grandfather once made it to the wealth rankings. It wasn't surprising that Ben, having attended the same high school, knew this before we got married. And expecting a backpack as a school entry gift for a grandson is common. However, Jim and I have no blood relation. Moreover, Jim doesn't even like me, so I've never taken him to my parents' house. Whenever I suggested visiting my parents for Christmas,
Jim and I are fine. We don't have any blood relation to your parents, so if you want to go, just go by yourself.
Ben refused, citing the lack of blood relation as a reason to avoid interacting with my parents. Yet, he was asking for a luxury backpack as a gift. My parents don't have any particular affection for Jim. That might be a bit difficult, I said with a forced smile, turning down Ben's suggestion. However, Ben got upset.
Why not? Just ask them. If they refuse, I'll take that as it is and reconsider our relationship.
His condescending tone irritated me. What does he mean by take that as it is? I held back my desire to argue. Of course, I couldn't impose such a burden on my parents. I secretly planned to buy the backpack with my own savings from before I was married, and pretend it was from them. Then, to my surprise, my parents offered to buy a backpack. In the countryside where I lived, it's customary for the maternal grandparents to present the backpack. I thought it might be presumptuous since Jim's biological mother's family or Ben's family might have planned something, considering Sarah is Jim's mother now. I felt warmth in my heart from my mother's words. There were people who recognized me as Jim's mother. On days when I felt like breaking down, my mother was always on my side. Thank you. It doesn't have to be expensive. I'd be happy if you could choose something Jim can easily use, I said, my voice nasal, expressing my gratitude. Then, a while later, a brand new backpack arrived. Jim's eyes sparkled when he saw it, and he happily carried it around. However, Ben frowned upon seeing Jim's reaction.
What's this? Too ordinary.
But this is what the store recommended. It's light and durable. Jim is small, so he shouldn't carry something heavy, right?
No, it's not about being light. It lacks luxury.
Ben continued to nitpick about the backpack we finally got, dampening Jim's initial excitement. Jim quietly set the backpack down after hearing Ben's words, and soon lost all interest in it. A similar situation occurred when he started middle school. Luxury brand sports bags and shoes for school were demanded as gifts from my parents. Jim, who had previously joined Ben in belittling me, began to mock me on his own as he entered middle school.
Must be nice to have married Dad just because your family is rich.
He would ridicule. I'm sure Ben had been filling his head with these ideas. Though I pretended not to notice, by this time, I was painfully aware. Ben had married me for my family's wealth and to secure someone to take care of Jim. All right, stop saying silly things and go study. I had given up on being liked by Jim by then. Being called a fake didn't change my sense of duty to raise him as his mother. If I left through divorce, Jim would have a hard time with just Ben. I might not have been the mother Jim wanted, but my affection for him was genuine. I wanted to spare him any hardship. As Jim grew and entered college, Ben suggested that my parents help with the expensive college fees.
Have them pay for his tuition. The money will eventually be Sarah's anyway. So it's better to use it on Jim now, right?
But asking my parents for such a large sum was out of the question. Backpacks and sports bags were one thing, but tuition was entirely different. I knew Ben would resent me if my parents couldn't provide it. I ended up using the settlement I received from my first divorce to cover the fees, preferring to say it came from my parents. Thanks to that, Jim was able to attend college for 4 years, secure a job, and was nearing graduation. We may not have had the best parent-child relationship, but I felt I had fulfilled my role when he grew up without major issues. Then one night, I woke up and got up to go to the bathroom. Noticing a light in the kitchen, I assumed Jim, who had been out, had returned. Heading to the kitchen to speak to him, I overheard a conversation.
We're graduating in half a year and have jobs lined up. We don't need her anymore, right? We don't, but let's at least use her until we get our inheritance. I too want to get rid of the trash as soon as possible.
It seems Ben was also awake. We had separate bedrooms, so this was the first time I realized Ben was up. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but their unsettling conversation froze me in place. Trash. Jim repeated Ben's words and laughed.
After the graduation ceremony, let's go out for a meal as a family. I'll treat you with my part-time job money.
I lifted my head at those words, but then felt like I was plunged back into hell.
Actually, I've invited Mom to the graduation. She used to come to my school events in elementary school, but I haven't invited her recently. I thought it'd be nice for the last time. Really? You're such a filial son. A family-only time after so long. I'm looking forward to it.
It was a casual conversation about inviting his biological mother to a meal. In itself, it wasn't a bad thing, and I hadn't raised him expecting anything in return. But since kindergarten, I had been rejected from attending every school event, even when I wanted to go to his college graduation.
Parents don't come to college graduations.
He had said, and I had given up. To think he had been inviting his biological mother since elementary school. She hadn't contributed to his upbringing or education, just gave birth. And yet everything was so convenient for her. Probably Ben had passed on the message without considering my feelings at all. Even though I tried to accept it, Jim's words directly hurt me, implying his biological mother was more important than me.
I'm not saying I'm not grateful to Sarah, but she's not family. I wondered how I'd raise you when we were divorced, but having a good housekeeper helped. Cleaning and laundry were fine, but I wish the cooking was better. The lunch boxes were so bad I always wondered who I could pawn them off to. You could buy whatever you liked with that money.
Jim and Ben continued their conversation, followed by laughter from. I stood there, stunned. This was an even more shocking fact. The fact that he had been selling the lunch boxes I made every day since middle school was appalling. It was disrespectful to whoever bought them and felt like a betrayal of my efforts for Jim. I forced myself to quietly walk away from the scene. Listening to their mocking laughter any longer felt like it would break me. 20 years of marriage. Raising Jim since he was 2. Yet, I was never acknowledged as family. I cried myself to bed. And then, I made up my mind about something I had kept to myself for a long time. For the next 6 months, I pretended not to hear their conversations and didn't change my demeanor. Then came Jim's college graduation. He left early in the morning, all excited. Of course, there was no word of thanks for raising him or an invite to a meal.
I won't need dinner today,
he said before leaving. Had I not heard that conversation, it might not have bothered me. But a word of gratitude wouldn't have been too much to ask, I thought. Probably he's going out to eat with his biological mother and Ben. Ben also said he didn't need dinner. After seeing them off, I was left alone in the quiet room, with just a pen and paper. It was past 1 p.m., and I was out having lunch when my mobile phone rang. It was Ben calling. I glanced at it and sipped my coffee with a smile. I had no intention of answering right away and left it ringing for a while. He must be panicking on the other end. Feeling a bit sorry for him, I finally picked up. Hello?
Sarah? Where are you? What's this note about?
As expected, Ben was in a panic. He must have returned home and seen the note. If I told you where I am, it wouldn't be running away. Would it? Everything is written in the note. When I said that to Ben.
What? But, I mean...
He stammered. The conversation was going nowhere, so I sighed deeply. That's why I left the divorce papers for you to file. At those words, Ben finally found his voice. I left behind my divorce application along with a note.
I won't accept a divorce. What do you mean by tuition fees being unpaid?
His focus on the unpaid tuition over the divorce made me smile again. I'm sure Ben was more concerned about the unpaid tuition than the divorce. Aren't you supposed to be working? How do you know about that? Ben stumbled over his words. It seemed he had been with Jim's biological mother at the graduation ceremony and found out about the unpaid tuition there.
Anyway, they said he can't graduate if we don't pay the outstanding amount this month. Tell your parents to transfer the money now.
Why should I? Am I just a housekeeper to you? My tone might have been harsh, but it was how I truly felt. I'm just a housekeeper, right? You've brainwashed Jim since he was little not to get attached to me.
That's not true. He was attached to you, and he did call you Mom.
Don't lie. He only called me Mom because you were worried about appearances, right? Ben fell silent. Anyway, I've paid 3.5 years of tuition. If you want him to graduate, why don't you pay the last semester as his parent? With that, I hung up. A few days after overhearing Ben and Jim mocking me, the bill for the tuition arrived. But after being treated like a mere housekeeper, I couldn't bring myself to pay it. The university contacted me several times. According to their rules, if tuition wasn't paid, Jim could attend the ceremony as a prospective graduate but would be expelled if not paid by the day of graduation. Essentially, I had to transfer about $6,000 by the end of the day. After hanging up with Ben, Jim called.
What's this about unpaid tuition fees? Why haven't you paid?
He didn't seem to be with Ben, or else he wouldn't dare to speak to me like that. Ask your dad for details. I no longer intend to be involved with you too.
What do you mean?
Take care.
Wait a minute.
I cut off Jim's words and ended the call. From the day I heard that conversation, I had decided to leave them behind. I vanished from their lives. My phone kept ringing all day long. If they had time for that, they should just make the payment. The next day, I changed my mobile phone and number. 3 months later, I went to the city hall for some errands and discovered the divorce papers hadn't been submitted. After 3 months, what were they doing? Feeling indignant, I reluctantly returned home. The key still worked, and as I entered, an odd smell wafted through the air. The smell! What is this smell? The rotting odor of food. Stepping into the living room, I saw its source. Scattered around were empty containers from delis and instant noodles. The sink overflowed with unwashed dishes. Socks whose removal time was unknown and a pile of laundry that was questionably clean. In just 3 months, the house had turned into a garbage dump. But, as expected, it was the home of 2 men who never did housework. It couldn't possibly be clean. Still, I had hoped for at least a bit of tidiness.
Sarah, you came back.
I shivered at the sound of my name being called. Turning around, there was Ben with an unkempt beard. Your job? When I asked, Ben hesitated before speaking.
I got fired.
Fired?
I took some money from the company's safe to pay for Jim's tuition, and they found out.
I was stunned by his admission. You embezzled for just $6,000?
Embezzlement sounds so harsh. I got fired, but the company said it's fine if I return the money. And since Jim won't have any more tuition fees, just come back home already.
Are you stupid? I yelled at him, louder than intended. I knew he was foolish, but this was beyond my imagination. Didn't I leave a note saying I was cutting ties with you too?
But now that it's come to this, I can't live without you. It's all because you and your parents didn't pay the tuition.
I sighed heavily at Ben's defiance.
Please, come back. I love you.
Ben pleaded with tears. A declaration he never made once during our marriage. Such late declarations of love held no meaning now. You've always relied on others. Why not try to manage something on your own for once? I said with a half smile. The room was filthy, as was the man. A noise drew my attention, and I saw a cockroach peeking out from an empty cup noodle container. With a house like this, Jim will surely leave too. Your family will just be cockroaches. I laughed. Ben said nothing in response, just hung his head. The divorce papers were successfully filed afterward. 3 years in a new place. I was finally able to live a happy life when I received the news of his death. I finally felt I had found happiness when I received the news of my mother's passing. At the funeral, two shadows approached me. I looked up slowly.
It's been a while. You look better than I thought.
It was Ben and Jim. We had many mutual acquaintances. They must have heard about my mother through someone. Jim, despite having received much from my mother, never thanked her. Part of me was glad. Thank you for coming. They came to see her off.
Of course. You're an only child, right? So you'll inherit everything, and eventually, as your son, I'll inherit too, right? Gotta thank Grandma.
What? I frowned at Jim's outrageous statement. Jim started saying something outrageous, and I felt disgusted with him. What are you talking about? You have no right to inherit anything.
But even if we divorced, Jim is still our child, right?
Ben smirked nastily. Anger welled up in me at their audacity. Leave! If that's your attitude, you shouldn't have come. My voice was louder than expected, attracting stares. Ben and Jim were unfazed by my shouting. But then, the situation flipped.
What's going on here?
Is everything all right? Two figures, a man and a woman, approached me. Seeing them, Ben and Jim went pale. The infamous ex-husband and his kid. I introduced Ben and Jim to Henry and Rolla. Their faces soured. Ben awkwardly said,
Boss, why are you here?
Boss? You know Henry? I asked Ben, but got no reply. Before Ben could answer, I continued. This is my husband Henry and our daughter Rolla.
What?
Ben and Jim looked up. Surprised.
Sorry for the trouble my wife has caused. You're Ben from Human Resources, right? Yes.
What do you mean? Ben works for Henry? When I asked Henry, he nodded. Ben looked uncomfortable.
I don't mix business with personal matters, but if you hurt Sarah any further, I won't forgive you. I didn't mean to.
Ben stumbled over his words. Jim remained silent, shrinking away. At that moment, Rolla spoke up. I heard something about inheritance, but Jim, you have no rights to it. Her tone was as if she knew Jim well. Besides, you're the stepson Sarah mentioned. Rolla said this and laughed. Jim, who had always looked down on me with arrogance, seemed unimaginably small now. When I looked at Rolla curiously, she explained, I'm Sarah's biological daughter. Why would you, a stepson, think you have any claim to inheritance?
Biological daughter?
Yes. I'm not a stepchild, but a daughter connected by blood. Did you really think you were the only child and special? Jim's face turned red. He had never considered the possibility that I had a biological child. In truth, Henry was my first husband. We had a daughter, Rolla, but I was never favored by his parents, and they took her away from me. You have no child, was the constant refrain of my in-laws. I wasn't allowed to raise Rolla. Henry always defended me, but his family had a long-standing business. And he couldn't defy his father. Eventually, I fell into despair and we divorced. I've heard that Rolla was lovingly raised by Henry afterwards. Despite his parents bad-mouthing me, Henry ensured Rolla grew up kind-hearted enough to send me considerate letters yearly. I was married to Ben and had no direct contact with them. Yet, Henry always made sure my parents and Rolla met, considering her their granddaughter. So, my mother often told me about Rolla. I was curious about Rolla but never expressed a desire to meet her while I was married. So, my affection for Jim was immense, but ultimately, it felt more like resilience than rewarded love. Some time after my divorce from Ben, Henry contacted me. He had learned of my divorce through my mother. Henry hadn't remarried after our divorce and seemed to have kept me in his thoughts. With his in-laws passed and his career stabilized, he proposed we marry again. I had informed Ben and Jim about this. So, Rala is my and Henry's daughter.
That's it.
Ben turned pale. He never imagined the woman he treated as a mere housekeeper was someone's cherished loved one. Did you approach me because I'm the boss's daughter? Rala asked Jim sharply.
It's not like that.
But you married Mom for Grandma's money, right? I can't date someone like that. Rala's words left Jim trying to hide his tears. Somehow, Jim had asked Rala out. If Jim hadn't been influenced by Ben, it would have been a joyous union between my children. Unfortunately, Jim had grown too much like Ben. Being with someone like Jim would definitely be tough. I couldn't help but agree. I guess I didn't raise you right. I'm sorry, Rala. You deserve someone better, Jim. Please stay away from Rala and the money. Jim, publicly rejected, glared at me but said nothing. He was a victim of Ben but now an adult. Without acknowledging his and his father's faults, happiness would remain elusive.
That's why you should leave. This place isn't for those who aren't family.
Henry said, effectively banishing them. It was the perfect parting shot for Ben and Jim. A boomerang of the words "you're not family" that had once been thrown at me. Ben has continued to work at Henry's company, feeling out of place. He probably dislikes it being my husband's company. But given his age and the reason he was fired from his previous job, it's unlikely he has anywhere else to go. Why did you hire him? Did you know about Ben? I asked, and Henry laughed.
Of course, I knew. If he's at my company, he can't harass you, right?
Henry's words warmed my heart. I hadn't realized it was all for me. Then, an even more surprising update came.
It seems like the son has cut ties. He's probably reflecting on his past actions and attitude towards you.
Apparently, Jim has moved out to live on his own. Rejected by Rala, whom he liked, and realizing that the inheritance he had counted on wouldn't come through. He must have understood that happiness requires his own effort. I don't feel pity for Ben, but I don't wish for Jim to be unhappy. Hoping he grows and finds happiness step by step is proof that I was Jim's mother. I continue to live with Henry and Rala. After I was driven out, Henry and Rala were saddened. And it seems my in-laws regretted their harshness. But I was already married by then. There was nothing that could be done.
I thought Sarah was happy.
Henry said so. There were happy times. I smiled. But surely, the happiest times of my life are yet to come. Rala is about to get married. I hope to live long enough to turn our past hardships into laughter, aiming to grow further. While I was out shopping, my phone rang with a call from Dob. Answering, I heard Dob's voice, sounding deflated. Well, what a surprise, you're alive. I heard the house caught fire. What? Indeed, I had heard sirens earlier, but never imagined it was my house involved. I heard a woman got seriously burned. You okay? What? I'm out shopping. There shouldn't be anyone at home. So it wasn't you who got taken away. Dob sounded more disappointed than relieved. Dob definitely knows something about this fire. I just had this gut feeling. I have many questions, but they can wait. I'm going to check on the house. I hung up and started running. My home, meant to be a modest yet warm sanctuary, was engulfed in flames. I can't believe it burned down. I've always held back, but if Dob was planning to hurt me, I'd never let it slide again. Sooner or later, people like Dob are bound to face their downfall. If that's the case, I'll be the one to push him over the edge. My anger is unstoppable. I am Sharon. A single, 40-year-old office worker. Well, perhaps not so ordinary. I'm a big fan of Meriwether, a male idol from Kiss Me Prince. I'm so hooked that I pour most of my monthly salary into supporting him. Meriwether has this younger brother vibe that's very healing to watch. I record all his shows, and for live events, I'm at my computer 10 minutes before tickets go on sale, ready to battle it out. My family and relatives might shake their heads, but this happiness is something only a true fan can understand. As long as I have someone to love, I should feel fulfilled, or so I thought. But now, Clayton, the last of my close friends from college, has gotten married. Looking around, I'm the only one left unmarried. The reality I've been avoiding all this time has finally caught up with me. Overwhelmed, I impulsively signed up on a matchmaking website. And I decided to attend a party organized by the matchmaking site, where I was destined to meet someone special. Wait. Meriwether? A young man who could be mistaken for Meriwether from afar was there. During the mingling time, I made a beeline for him. Excuse me. You're Meriwether from Kiss Me Prince, right? He laughed, amused. People say I look like him, so I've styled my hair and vibe to match. His name was Clayton, 5 years my junior at 35. But youthful enough to pass for his 20s. As a self-confessed idol fanatic, I was completely charmed by Clayton. Clayton seemed to take a liking to me too, and we started dating. He treated me like a fan on our dates, and I found myself falling for him, projecting Meriwether onto Clayton. In hindsight, it was odd that such a desirable man would choose a 40-year-old idol otaku like me, but at the time, I was oblivious. Soon, I received a formal proposal. The proposal took place at a location where Meriwether once proposed to the lead actress in a TV drama. Lost in my romantic fantasy, I accepted his proposal without hesitation. However, just before we were to register our marriage, Clayton brought a high school boy to our date. Actually, I have a son living with me. The boy introduced as his son, Dob, didn't resemble Clayton much. He was a quiet-looking kid. Clayton is 17 years old, wearing thick glasses and with unkempt hair. His gloomy appearance was evident as he wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I should have come clean sooner, but just couldn't find the words. I'm sorry, Sharon. His apology pose, so reminiscent of Meriwether's that it seemed studied, unexpectedly triggered my maternal instincts. I suppose I can forgive you. We were a completely foolish couple. Then, I overheard Dob muttering under his breath. Just another wrinkled old lady. I couldn't believe my ears. What? It was said so naturally that I wondered if I had misheard. I asked Dob to repeat himself, but Clayton interrupted. Dob seems happy to have a new mom. Let's get along. Clayton and I then went to submit our marriage license. Since the office was closed, we left it with a security guard and officially became husband and wife. Originally, I lived in a house with plenty of empty rooms, so I decided to have Clayton and Dob move in. To be precise, the rooms weren't exactly empty but filled with merchandise of my beloved. But now, I was going to live with my real beloved. I decided to let the merchandise sleep at my parents' house. It was a significant decision for me. Packing away my cherished Kiss Me Prince goods into cardboard boxes, I made a promise to put Meriwether on hold for a while and focus on building a warm family. I thought the fun times as a family of 3 would begin once Clayton and Dob moved in, but that didn't happen. Clayton, claiming to be busy with work, would stay at the office 2 or 3 nights a week, leaving me and the gloomy Dob alone at home most of the time. Dob continued to avoid eye contact and seldomly spoke. Except for school hours, he barely went out, spending most of his time locked in his room playing video games. Yet at meals, he would mutter barely audibly complaints about the meat being hard or the food not being worthy of the name. While I tolerated his complaints as childlike behavior, his lack of initiative in job hunting or studying while gaming all day bothered me. So, I brought it up with Clayton when he returned home late one night. What's going on with Dobbs' career path? Clayton responded with apparent annoyance. I'm leaving it up to Dobb. He should do what he wants. I mentioned that Dobb didn't seem to be job hunting or studying at all. But Clayton wouldn't take it seriously. Look, Sharon, can't you see? It's late. I just got home. I'm tired. Can you not stress me out with trivial matters? Despite his fatigue, shouldn't he be concerned about his child's future? Was it strange that I, once a stranger to them, was the only one worried? That thought crossed my mind, but I couldn't voice it further. It was just sad that Clayton, who used to dote on me, now treated me as a nuisance. Then, one day, Dobb unusually brought home a girl. She was a quiet girl, wearing glasses, just like Dobb. I had thought he wasn't the type to attract someone, but perhaps Dobb had gotten himself a girlfriend. After eating and drinking in the living room, they whispered to each other for a while before leaving the house. Honestly, I was the one who felt nervous. Until recently, the thought of becoming a mother hadn't crossed my mind, but now, was I to educate teenagers about sex all of a sudden? I was relieved when they quietly left. I watched from the second-floor window as Dobb and the girl walked away side by side. That's when it happened. I noticed a woman glaring at me from over the fence of the neighboring house. The sight was so terrifying that my body froze, unable to move. The woman soon disappeared behind the fence. I wanted to discuss it with Clayton immediately, but he didn't come home that night. Just remembering the woman's gaze from the daytime frightened me, making it hard to fall asleep. Perhaps due to the stress, I came down with a cold the next day. Dragging my heavy body to work, dealing with Dobbs' complaints, and after managing the household chores, Clayton came home just as I was lying down. I tried to bring up the woman I saw the previous day. But seeing my intent expression, Clayton grimaced. Is this about Dobb again? Got more complaints? It's not a complaint. By the way, it seems Dobb has got himself a girlfriend. Clayton sneered, looking pleased in a distasteful way. For a moment, his smile, reminiscent of Merriweather, was soothing. Until he spoke again. That's my boy. The art of roping in simple girls, I taught him well. Simple girls? I echoed back, and Clayton hastily corrected himself. No, I misspoke. Just shared some tips on wooing a girl he likes. Then, he gently tapped my head. Thanks for all your hard work. I appreciate what you do for me. Being treated this way used to bring me the utmost joy during our dating days. But now, I couldn't shake off the doubts in my heart. Was I considered a simple girl too? Was I being strung along? But for what reason? I'm just a temp worker, neither wealthy nor well off. After Clayton went to take a shower, I rummaged through his wallet as a precaution, but found no suspicious receipts. Still, I couldn't shake off a bad feeling and grew increasingly distrustful of Clayton. And so, I never got around to talking about that woman. The next morning, Clayton had already left for work by the time I woke up. As I went downstairs to make breakfast, I was greeted by the pleasant smell of sausages cooking. Something that had never happened since we got married. To my surprise, Dobb was preparing breakfast for me in the kitchen. Sausages and fried eggs with salad and yogurt. He had even poured me a cup of coffee. Wow, this is amazing! What's all this for? Dobb, avoiding eye contact again, murmured in a soft voice. You're not feeling well, right? Thought I'd at least make breakfast. For the first time, I felt a genuine warmth and care coming from Dobb. I'm so happy! Thank you! Embarrassed, or perhaps ignoring my gratitude, Dobb shoved the frying pan into the sink. He didn't do the dishes, but it was a start. I'm off to school. With that, Dobb grabbed his bag and left through the entrance. Savoring this moment of joy, I sat alone at the dining table and began my breakfast. Let's eat. Any homemaker knows there's significance even in a simple meal prepared for them. I reached for the coffee first, intending to eat everything, but in my excitement, I knocked over the cup. The coffee Dobb poured out spilled all over the table. Oh no, I'm such a klutz. Although regrettable, it didn't dampen my spirits. Quickly wiping the table and finishing my breakfast, I felt somewhat lighter. Right, I need to go grocery shopping. And we're out of detergent, too. I'll head to the cheaper supermarket a bit farther away. I walked to a supermarket I don't usually visit. Passing by a fire engine on the way made me feel a bit uneasy. I hoped whatever house it was heading to would be safe. While shopping, my mobile phone vibrated. It was a call from Dob. Answering, I heard Dob's unexpectedly indifferent voice. Well, what a surprise, you're alive. Alive? What was he talking about? As I puzzled over his words, Dob dropped a bombshell. The house burned down. I saw it on social media. What? I did hear sirens earlier, but to think it was my house. Heard a woman got seriously burned. Are you okay? Something felt off. This wasn't the same Dob who showed kindness earlier. His words felt distant, almost mocking. What? I'm out shopping. No one should be at home. So it wasn't you who got taken away? The art of roping in simple girls, I taught him well. Dob must know something about this fire. I felt it instinctively. There's a lot I want to ask, but that can wait. I need to see the house for myself. I hung up and started running, catching a taxi to rush to the scene. When I arrived, the house was indeed completely destroyed. A crowd had gathered in front of what used to be my home. Leighton from the neighborhood approached me excitedly. You're safe, that's good. A young girl in a uniform was taken to the local emergency hospital. Who is she? I couldn't confidently answer the question, but there was one person I could think of who might be the girl in uniform. It was Dob's girlfriend who had visited our house recently. I was stopped by the police, who mentioned they wanted to talk later due to the incident's nature. I got back into a taxi and headed to the emergency hospital. As the taxi swayed, tears began to form. My home, supposed to be a modest yet warm sanctuary, was all gone. I can't believe it was completely consumed by flames. And Dob's attitude on the phone earlier kept bothering me. If his kindness this morning was only superficial, intending to harm me afterward, I would never show leniency again. Sooner or later, people like Dob would face their reckoning. If so, I was ready to be the one to push him. My rage was unstoppable. At the hospital, I tried to inquire about the situation but was denied due to privacy concerns, unable to meet the girl brought from our house. As I sat in the lobby, a woman rushed in, frantic. Where's Bess? I saw on the news she was severely injured. It's okay. The news was incorrect. She suffered burns to her face and limbs, but her life is not in danger. I was startled. I knew this woman. She was the one who had glared at me through the fence that day. Noticing me, she introduced herself with a business card. My name is Chanel. I'm Clayton's wife and the mother of Dob and Bess. I exclaimed in surprise. But I'm Clayton's wife. Chanel seemed to want to explain, but decided visiting her daughter was more urgent. Sharon, please come with me. In the hospital room, the girl who had visited our house, Dob's girlfriend, lay in bed. Upon seeing me, she burst into tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Comforted by Chanel, Bess sobbed and revealed the whole story. Turns out, Bess wasn't Dob's girlfriend but his sister. She had admired her kind brother since they were young. But some point in time, her brother changed. She said he learned from our father how to wrap simple girls around his finger. After that, he rarely came home. Probably because he was living with me, but Dob told Bess he was living with a convenient woman. Even when he did come back, seeing my brother repeat his misogynistic remarks, Bess wished for the brother she remembered. How can I get my kind brother back? She asked Dob, and to that he answered like this. I want you to set fire to the house of Dad's mistress, Sharon. Bess, swayed by Dob, scouted my house for this reason. That's why Bess had come to my house. After much hesitation, thinking of her brother, she went through with it. But called the authorities immediately after realizing the gravity of her actions. To save me, supposedly asleep inside, she broke a window to enter the house and got injured.
Wait. What do you mean supposedly asleep?
Through tears, Bess answered. My brother planned to put sleeping pills in your coffee. A chill ran through me. Had I not spilled my coffee, I might not have been safe. Chanel, in a near frenzy, scolded Bess and apologized to me.
How could you do such a foolish thing? You nearly killed someone. Sharon, I don't know how to apologize enough. It was a lack of supervision on our part. What Dob and Bess did was terrifying.
About that, I started, addressing my lingering doubts.
Dob is legally my child now, right? We submitted the marriage license.
Chanel hesitantly took a piece of paper from her bag. It was Clayton's family register. Indeed, Chanel's name was listed as his wife. My husband had previously deceived another woman in the same way. You and Clayton submitted the marriage license after hours, didn't you? She was spot on. Because he's already married, it should have been rejected, but the security guard accepted it after hours. Probably, the office tried to contact Clayton's mobile afterward, saying the license is invalid due to bigamy. Faced with this unbelievable truth, I felt dizzy.
Why would Clayton do something like this?
Chanel sighed deeply, her forehead marked with deep lines of hardship.
Sharon, by any chance, are you a fan of Meriwether from Kiss Me Prince? My husband is obsessively confident in his resemblance to Meriwether. He completely imitates Meriwether's fashion, hair, and gestures, approaching female fans to cheat and revel in the thrill. He can't be satisfied unless women idolize him like an idol. I've had enough this time.
At that moment, the door of the hospital room opened, and a flustered Clayton entered. Seeing Chanel and me together, he had a look of regret. With fiery anger in my eyes, I glared at Clayton.
So we were strangers all along. You said you were staying at the office, but you were actually going back to Chanel's?
Clayton frantically tried to explain, but I wasn't listening anymore.
I'll be filing for damages, including for the house your son burned down. We're not related, so it won't be dismissed as a family matter.
I grabbed my bag and strode out of the hospital room. Behind me, I could hear Chanel and Clayton arguing. As I vowed not to let this end here, I went back to my parents' home. Afterward, Dob was arrested by the police. At my request, Bess was not arrested and was able to go home after being discharged from the hospital. Bess's face was left with scars from the burns. The emotional scars inflicted by her brother wouldn't heal easily. She would have to carry the heavy cross of having committed arson. I thought there was no need to punish her further. As for Dob, who showed no remorse, I intended to let the authorities handle him. Dob was about to turn 18. He was likely to be tried as an adult, not protected by juvenile law. While preparing the lawsuit, the doorbell rang. There stood Clayton. Sharon, I'm really sorry about Dob. Can we start over? I want you to be my fan again. Can you give me that energy of liking someone? Can you give me that energy of liking someone? Was a classic line from Meriwether's concerts. The old me would have been swayed, but now it just seemed like a mockery of Meriwether.
You're not an idol. Just a 35-year-old man who looks like one. And if you don't realize it soon, you'll continue to embarrass yourself.
At my words, Clayton, flush with shame and anger, lashed out at me.
What the hell? You've always seen me as just a substitute for Meriwether, haven't you?
I can't say I was without fault. But Clayton, having cleverly orchestrated this situation, now acted as if I was to blame.
Yes, and I've realized it. You're neither Meriwether nor my ideal prince. Just a middle-aged man full of self-delusion.
I slammed the content certification for the compensation claim I had prepared into Clayton's hands.
This arson incident is the result of your misguided teachings. You'll take full responsibility. I'll add on the amount for deceiving me, so make sure you pay up. Otherwise, I'll sue you for marriage fraud.
Clayton, who had come to plead for reconciliation, was instead faced with a compensation claim and turned away in defeat. Self-centered to the end, Clayton left filled with disappointment. Perhaps frightened by the threat of a lawsuit for marriage fraud, Clayton later transferred the compensation amount, significantly more than the market rate, in one lump sum. This must have drained Clayton's savings completely. I heard that Chanel also divorced him and demanded compensation. For a while, he'll be without money, making it difficult to maintain the idol-like hairstyles and clothes. As for Dobb, he was tried as an adult and sentenced to prison. During the trial, Dobb's stubborn refusal to show any remorse, blaming the series of crimes on me, seemed to worsen the impression of the jury. As a result, he received a heavier prison sentence than usual. Of course, he was expelled from high school. Dobb's misdeeds became widely known in the local community, making it impossible for him to continue living there after his release. In the evening, I bought a number of pen lights and headed to the park. Girls all dolled up were waiting in high spirits, waving their light sticks. Today was the long-awaited live concert of Kiss Me Prince. I dug out the merch I had put to sleep and resumed my fandom. Going to the live with female friends I made in the fandom is now my greatest joy. After all, the charm of having a crush lies in them being out of reach. Vowing never to make the same mistake again, I headed towards the live venue.